I am so glad to be here. One of the values of this symposium has been that the parent voice is present. So whether this is your first symposium or your 11th symposium, one thing you can count on when you come to this symposium is you will hear parent voices. They have come in many forms over the years, but they will be here. There are many spaces that you may be in as a clinician or as a community member around Press and Code where you don't hear parent voices. This is a place where you, right? Before I forget, I'm going old school for communication. This is your communication tool with me. So I all combined in times really a tight time frame that we don't have a lot of time for questions. So if you would like to stay in touch with me or be with you, or you have a question, this is your tool. Write it down and I'll just gather. Yeah, right. Where's my cue purse? Is it E? Who's picking it? All those. We didn't. All right. Here's 3 things we're going to do. We're not going to do them in direct order. So we're going to explore the growth of peri-enrollment in pediatric palliative care. We're going to reflect on some gaps. We've already heard several of them here today. As we go, we're going to do the 3rd one concurrently. Okay? The big thing I want you to walk away with is to be able to identify a gap and an ask that you can make in your sphere of influence. If you've met me and seen me present, welcome to the co-working space. We're here to do some work together. We gathered our time, gathered our resources. We're going to get to work, and so we're going to do that. You have some Post-its that you can use if you don't have notebooks. There'll be some times when I'll be inviting you to engage in some writing. This is how I entered pediatric palliative care. Welcome to my stone Dubai, if you haven't met him yet. We found ourselves as a NICU unexpectedly, first-time parents, severe HIE, brain damage. Didn't know what that was, had never met anyone in the NICU before. Thanks to the best first birthday present, a pediatric palliative care consult, we received pediatric palliative care in the hospital. We got to go home at the 3rd week. He became old enough to be a big brother. A nice little story about here. This is one of our favorite parks. When we went to new palliative care, and the early stages of that is goals of care, right? Hopes, wishes, fear, dreams, must-dos, never-dos, and how do you translate that into medical decisions? After we did all that D work, we also talked about how because of Levi's respiratory, likely his first pneumonia would be the end of his life. He made it through his first pneumonia and settled. And after that first pneumonia, we had found this park. And so the first place we went after we made it through that first pneumonia is the Hyatt. So if you haven't been to the island, please go. Whether you just go for yourself or just know, like, that's what quality of life looks like. We make it through the hard times and we get back out in the community. We connect with nature and with time and place and space. So this is our family. Levi lived 7 difficult, intense, amazing years. We ran an ICU in our home to take care of him. As you can see, he became a big brother, and these have life in addition to being bereaved. One of the things pediatric palliative care taught us is let the child lead you. Let the child lead you. So our second son decided to become an alpine racer. I was brought up with the thought that if you went downhill skiing, you might as well say hello to the ER. Well, anybody can learn a new trick. And in my later life, I am learning how to alpine ski because I let the child lead. He has a goal that we will all make it to the West Coast skiing. Go, child. In my role as a parent advocate, it started with a simple question from a palliative care nurse. Hey, we're doing some stories on families. Could we send out a photographer? I'll come with them. And we'd like to just ask a few questions and take a few photos because we'd like to get to know the families you're here for a little better. That was the first step into advocacy. And that advocacy has expanded over 12 years. I've had the honor of serving the palliative care community pediatrics specifically over 12 years in a lot of different settings, research, education, in many different ways. So here's part of our work today. You have a circle of influence. I have a circle of influence. As we go through the different roles that parents have had in pediatric palliative care and helping to grow the field, I want you to think specifically about your circle of influence. Maybe that's the personal circle that you have. Maybe that's related to your professional role. And think about, in your circle, how can you open the door for a parent, a family member, to join you in the work and the influence that you have. I am a parent advocate because many times it was clinicians who said, we need a parent voice here. And then went on to say, hey, would you be willing to help us out? It's also happened because I have expressed as a parent, this is the space I'd like to step into. So if you're from a family perspective, it may be that you want to step into a specific aspect of advocacy, of engaging in growing the field, okay? So let's keep this in mind as we go. Language is important. When I say parent involvement, I mean fan involvement. Most of what I will talk about is parents' involvement. One of the growth aspects that we have is that we would start to engage the child in growing the field. We are engaging siblings better in our care to families, but there's also an opportunity for these siblings who grow up to be adults to also be involved in growing up the field. And we have care to give and growth in the field, two different things, that can be extended to the extended family members. So however you need to hear the word parent or caregiver in your space, and as it was brought up earlier, a big growth area that we have is being able to see more of our community, not just people who look like me in these spaces. So here's the most common place that we see parent involvement, and I frame this a little differently, okay? My framing is parent involvement that centers on the child and the lived experience. This is what's most common. This is where parents often start, and this is often where we see and engage parents. So speaking, writing, influencing, and connector. That may be writing blogs and articles. That may be speaking at conferences. That may be speaking in a parent panel. There are so many ways that speaking shows up. Speaking may also be the voice of the family and the parent in research. And again, the focus is that it's centered on the life of the child and the lived experience. So there are spaces where we ask families to come forward, like that initial ask, and say, can you tell us your story? Can you share your lived experience, right? And so the influencer may also be just the parent who's sharing their story drip by drip on social media. It's not necessarily like the big social influencer. An influencer can also be a parent advisory board where they're influencing what's happening in a particular organization. And parents are often great connectors. And this is one we often don't think of as well, but funding is a way that parents are advancing the field. The parents who speak at the Crescent Cove Gala are centering their work on their child and their lived experience to help fundraise for Crescent Cove. This can also be families who launch a nonprofit. We often see this in that bereavement space, a golf tournament or a full organization that then the funds go to fund an aspect of palliative care, or initiating an endowment. One of the research and education works that I do at the University of Minnesota is educating fellows in end-of-life care skills. We now have an interdisciplinary workshop as well. That fellows workshop happens because a family started a foundation to say, we got palliative care. We want to help the next generation of clinicians be educated in palliative care and they had the resources to fund the fellowship that then funds the workshop. So a question is to give some thought to, and grab your piece of paper, your Post-it note. What are 2 to 3 ways that Carrot Voices centered on their child's lived experience could show up more fully in your sphere of influence? Another way to say that is, where are the parent voices missing? How could parent voices be more fully present in your sphere of influence? 2 to 3 ideas, just writing. Where would you like to learn more about the parent experience? To improve care or visit research, whatever that context might be. And if you're a parent or family member, in these aspects, what would you like to do more of? Conflict the question if a parent or parent. And again, parent might mean parents, it might mean grandparent, it might be a sibling. Make sure it's very specific to your context. Where is the voice, parent, the child, the lived experience needed? Where do we need to increase that? 2 to 3 places. All right. So the next area is centering on the learner or the focus objectives. This is different than centering on the child. And I think it's a distinction that gets missed. And sometimes when it gets missed, we often miss what we're looking for or what the parent is offering, right? So when I go into an educational setting where we're like at the University of Minnesota, where teacher hand-of-life skills, that focus is on growing the learner. The focus isn't more on me telling my child's story explicitly. I tell aspects of my child's story, but they are then in service to growing the learner. Is that clear on that? When I go into, when parents go into conferences, or if parents are working on a communication piece. So at St. Jude's, they got very extensive involvement of parents. And one of the areas is that any communication, printed, written, digital, that comes out of their palliative care department is vetted by parents. Parents review it. Well, that communication piece has a goal that's trying to communicate something, right? So that's where the parent is contributing to the goal of that communication piece. So some of the ways that this can show up, and here I'm going to give some specific examples, is as we heard about, we have state advisory councils. We have one here in Minnesota. We have pediatric coalitions across the U.S. We have one here in Minnesota. The National Task Force, which became the Pediatric Division, which you've heard about. There have been convenings across the field. One that happened a couple years ago was around concurrent care. That one was particularly interesting because we brought pediatrics and adult perspectives together around concurrent care. Parents also show up as board members in different organizations, and parents also contribute to the development of the program itself for refining or improving. We see this most commonly in bereavement programs and developments where parents have voices into that. So this is considered more that advisory consultant role that parents have. They bring the lived experience, but then that is expanded to then support the needs of the learner for the reason why they're convening. Another aspect is education. So IPSI was one of the first revolutionary ways that brought parents in. This was a team-based education around pediatric palliative care. And IPSI as an organization had parents, mostly bereaved parents, on their FAS educators. And then every palliative care team that came had to bring carers as a part of their team so that when they went back into the community, they had parents involved in the growth and development of their palliative care program. The Pediatric End-of-Life Care Skills Work Group is the one that I mentioned that's at the University of Minnesota. This one has parents involved from the inception of the education through to the faculty and all the way out to dissemination. We actually just had, we're in the Pain and Symptom Journal of Pain and Symptom Management. We just had a peer-reviewed piece that got published in that. So this also happens in clinician workshops and conferences where parents are being brought in as educators, parent panels, and we're starting to see more and more grand rounds, which is medical education. And then research, this getting carers not just involved as advisors, but as co-investigators. This is something that's growing slowly, that needs to continue to grow. The place that parents sort of have gotten stuck is just like, hey, now that we have this research project ready, let's bring parents in, ask some questions along the way, versus engaging them in the work of the research. Two different distinctives. So this is an area that's growing, and we're seeing it in a couple different places. So the third area, I wanted to go back, sorry. Here's my brief question, because I'm going to run through this, because we have just a little time. Is there a place in your sphere of influence where a parent's family member could become more involved in the work that you do? Where would that be? As an advisor or a consultant, as a co-educator, as someone who's involved in research. Take 2 minutes, make some notes. As your role, as your sphere grows within pediatric palliative care, where could the parent or family voice become more integral to that program? If you're a family member, is there an aspect of this you'd like to step into? All right, the third area, and some parents jump all the way to this. This is not the linear process by any means. There are parents and family members who they want to stay focused and centered on the child in some role or another. Others want to move, will jump right into the learner one. Generally, we don't want the parents make a progression from their lived experience to them being able to expand beyond that for many, many reasons. Some of which is there's more training for parents. As little as there is, there's more training for how to center and tell your story based on your lived experience in your child than there is on being an educator, being a researcher, and so forth. Some parents jump all the way into this space where they actually see the needs and they jump all the way into innovation, where they're like, I see a giant bowl. We can work with this. We can do this. One great example, here's several examples. If you haven't checked out Mijo or My Mijo, this is 2 dads, one of which was a NICU dad, and he saw this gap between all the chart and the medical information that had to be gathered, and then that actual personhood of my child, which we heard some conversation about earlier, right? Who is my child as a person? So My Mijo is an app that's available to families that you can add in the medical information, but you can also add in narrative, visual narrative, so that as you're moving in and out of different care settings, you can be educating those care providers on who is your child outside of this setting. Ryan's House, as we know, was started by 2 parents, the second children's respite and hospital home in the U.S. Courageous Parents Network was launched by Glyce Blord, which is an awesome a resource if you don't already know about it. They have both Courageous Parents Network and then Neuro Journey, and then now gathering some grief resources. Changing Spaces, we have Pleasant Cove parent who's been involved in this. So this has to do with when we, as family members, go out into the community, if my child is larger or heavier than a changing table for an infant, how do we do this? And this is a barrier. Brilliant. They went, your architects are going to love this, they went for the building code. The building code has now been changed in the state of Minnesota, that new buildings, and Minnesota innovated and said, including park buildings, including rest stops, that they need to have what's called a universal changing table. Bigger, longer, can support more weight, so that families can get out, be a part of our greater Minnesota, and not have this be a barrier. You know, where do we need to go to make the change, right? Where's the spearmint group? Redbird Time is the organization that I've launched. There's information out there on the table back there. We're really centered on grief care. So bringing family voices forward and perspectives, but also on grief care for families, but also for clinicians. We're an ecosystem. It was mentioned, like, the families get cut off right after the child dies. So did the clinicians. We've built relationships together to care for these children. And grief is present in all places. We also have grief in the journey, not just bereavement care. So one of the things I've been doing in partnership with Brighter Days Family Grief Center is anticipatory grief. Not just anticipatory death grief, but pre-decline, pre-change. There's a lot of grief in the journey, so let's bring some support around that. And the Canuck Place, which is in British Columbia, that's a children's hospice and respite home, one of their innovations that they're doing with families, because they actually have a staffed role. They have 2 locations. They have staff role that is a family liaison. And this staff role is a liaison to the families as they come in to help bridge the experience, but then also to the staff, to the clinical staff, to be able to speak to family perspectives inside of the Canuck Place's operations. So these are just some examples of how families have been a part of innovation. So my question to you on this one, really briefly, 2 minutes, what's an innovation that you've seen that a parent or family member has been involved in your sphere? And all of you can say Crescent Cove, because there's a full group of us, we call ourselves the OGs, of the parents who've been a part of Crescent Cove prior to the building opening. That's how we phrase ourselves. So what's an innovation or a change or a need that you have seen that's been met by a parent or family member as it relates to pediatric palliative care? Take a minute or 2. And as you do, I want to focus that there's also this open space. There's always the horizon for curiosity and what hasn't yet come. So I placed the open space intentionally here to make note that parents and family members are going to continue to expand the ways that they're showing up to help all of us bring forth the growth of this field. Because we know that education and awareness needs to expand, and so does how does the work work, and how does the work work well. So to close, I want to invite you to consider a specific part of your sphere of influence. Maybe it relates to something you've written in our 3 moments of reflection, but what is a specific space where you could help bring a parent-family voice forward? What's a specific need that needs the voice, the support, the engagement of a parent and family member? Name the need. Take a moment to write. This is your moment. name the need, and name what is the first ask you need to make. Maybe in your clinical role, you need to ask of River, hey, we keep gathering for this committee, whatever it is. I notice we don't have a parent here, but we're making decisions about things. We say we're a coalition. I'm part of the Pediatric Palliative Care Coalition, so I know there's parents there. We say we're a coalition, but we don't have parents or family here. Or which families are we missing? So what's the circle that you have that interfaces with pediatric palliative care that you could make an ask, even if you don't know who the parent is? Or maybe you do have a parent that you'd like to engage and make an ask of. Take 1 minute to just be really specific with your sauce. What's the need? What's the ask that I can ask within my spirit? And then this one we're going to just share with the partner. What's the need? What's the ask?
And I invite you in the next 2 weeks to make your ask. It might take some time to lay the groundwork, right? So I'm not going to say by Fridays. Good asks have good foundations, good rooting. But I invite you to make your ask. Lay the foundation, start to open those doors. Whatever direction it is, your role and your influence is going to make a difference. And I can say that as someone who's standing here 12 years later. I never thought that first ask would turn into published research, would turn into standing at the Academy of Pediatrics section on hospice and palliative medicine and receiving an award on behalf of being able to educate other parents. I never thought that first ask would turn into Crescent Coast. The ask is the drop in the ripple, and you get to be a part of that. So go, someone said it, be brave.